What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm going to be talking about the same fight night event that I covered in my previous video of the Mackenzie Dern versus Armanda Ribas 2 fight night card. The first fight that I highlighted in that previous video was Roman Kopylov taking on Chris Curtis. I had Roman Kopylov to win, and he did. The fight did take place standing up for the majority until the third round, where Roman Kopylov decided to mix in the takedowns. However, in that second round, he did begin to fade a little bit, and Chris Curtis did catch a second win. He had really good rolling, and he switched to the body uppercut, and he landed a lot of damage in that second round. In the first round, Roman Kopylov was connecting with a 1-2, and he actually stunned Chris Curtis at the end of the round. In round 3, he started to get back the momentum, and it was clear to see that he was landing the harder shots in that third round while he was mixing in the takedowns. Chris Curtis also did absorb damage when he shelled up, and once he started to open up during exchanges, he took a lot of hard hits and he dropped his hands, which led to that head kick at the end of the round. I did want to mention the stoppage. I do think it was a weird stoppage. I think it was only a knockdown and not a finish, as there was no follow-up or a threat for any further damage on Chris Curtis, and there was only a second of the round left. So I do think that the referee did pull the trigger early on that finish. I do think that Roman Kopylov, whether that fight went to the scorecards or not, was winning that fight, and I give him the first and third round. The second round I give to Chris Curtis, as he really did come out with way better striking. He had good rolling, and he switched to the body uppercut, and he landed a lot more damage in that round. As I assumed this was going to be a stand-up fight, aside from that third round where Roman Kopylov was trying to play the scorecards to get a clear win in that third round, as the fight was one apiece for both Kopylov and Curtis. So mixing in the takedowns does show that he is improving as a mixed martial artist, and he is getting that all-around base for MMA and not just relying on his striking. One fight I did not cover in my previous video was the Cesar Almeida versus Abdullah Razak Alhassan. Cesar Almeida ended up getting performance of the night after knocking out Alhassan in the first round. One thing that stood out to me during this performance was Almeida's ability to keep his composure even after the knockdown and having to fight off his back to get back up. His ability to get back up off the ground and his takedown defense in this fight does show that he has been working to improve his wrestling, especially after his last fight against Kopylov, as he was taken down pretty much the entire fight. I do think that his knockout sequence was also really good in showing his composure, as Alhassan was chasing the finish, and he was able to counter with the left hook during that heavy exchange, and he was able to knock him out. I think if Almeida can keep on working to improve his wrestling and showcase that in his fights, just as he did in this fight, I think he can be a big star in the middleweight division, as he does have the hype around him for having a win against Alex Pereira in kickboxing, being 1-2 against him in glory. Moving on to the second fight I covered in the previous video was Santiago Ponzinibbio defeating Carlston Harris. In the opening sequence of the fight, Ponzinibbio just looked really fast. He had a really good 1-2. He looked very crisp. He was mixing it up from the head to the body, and he was showing a lot of that forward pressure. However, Harris did start to turn it around during the end of the round by catching counters and starting to counter punch Ponzinibbio as he was coming in, and ended up scoring a big knockdown at the end of the round, which I do think won him the round. However, round 2, Ponzinibbio, he wasn't aggressive, but he did start to land a lot more calculated shots, and he landed a lot of damage on Harris in that round. In that second round, I think Harris started to change his game plan, as he started scoring with leg kicks, and he was being more patient to counter Ponzinibbio as he was coming in. But as a result, Ponzinibbio wasn't being as aggressive as he was in that first round, and he started to land more calculated shots and change his game plan as well. In that third round, Harris attempted to mix in the grappling, which Ponzinibbio was able to aggressively counter, and he had very good technical scrambles to get out of the grappling exchanges. and he landed a 1-2 that wobbled Harris with that straight right hand. He followed it up with a left hook and mixed in the uppercuts as well to get that standing TKO finish. And he really did work to chase the finish after wobbling Harris. I think that Santiago struggled with the power and awkwardness of Harris's striking, but his striking was a lot more accurate, and he did look really good during this fight. Although being dropped a couple times, he did offer a very exciting fight. Moving forward in his fighting career, I do think that Ponzinibbio has established himself as a welterweight veteran, and he's become a really good name to have on your resume when you're working your way up the ranks in that welterweight division. So guys like Randy Brown or Brian Battle, those types of guys would want to fight this guy in order to put their names up on that rankings. So I do think that Ponzinibbio has taken that spot in this division as being the guy you want on your resume, just after his previous history of just finishing fights and being in the UFC for as long as you have and just looking good in his last couple performances. I think that Ponzinibbio is the guy you want to beat right before you start to get ranked. Now, as for the main event, I did have Amanda Ribas winning this one, but Mackenzie Dern just looked a lot better in this fight. Even in the round that I think she lost, I feel like she did more. But let's start by discussing that first round. There wasn't much going on the feet. Mackenzie Dern ended up landing a takedown off of her blitz, which she was using to land flurry punches earlier in the round, and she decided to mix in that takedown to get Ribas off guard, and she ended up landing a takedown and staying on top for the rest of the round, landing a little bit of ground and pound. So that round was hers, no doubt about it. I would give the second round to Ribas. However, I do think Dern looked a lot better in this round as Ribas reversed her takedown attempt in the guard. She remained cautious and she was only landing body shots, whereas when Dern was on her back, she was really active as she set up armbar by hipping out, and she had an omoplata submission attempt, which she used to sweep and get on top at the end of the round. I think that Mackenzie Dern gained a lot of confidence on the ground in that second round, as she did look better than Ribas despite losing on the scorecards. In the third round, she engaged in the grappling, even though she got taken down by Ribas in the clinch with a hip toss. She was able to set up a first armbar attempt, which she used to as a sweep to get into mount, which is her favorite top position in her fights to transition into, and she was able to get that second armbar attempt and finish that submission. I think a win like this elevates Mackenzie Dern into that title picture, as it either puts her next in line for a title shot in this division, or it puts her up there for a title elimination fight. As for Amanda Ribas, I think she loses any big fights in the strawweight division, and I think she's going to be looking for more fights in that flyweight division, as she's just coming off a loss against Nama Nunes, and then coming off a loss of Dern in her last fight. She hasn't really found a home in the strawweight division, so it just might be easier for her to transition back into that flyweight division after just losing to Nama Nunes, who just fought Aaron Blanchfield, which was a big fight for that division. That is all I really have to say about this card. I feel like the fights that I wanted to cover, being Kopylov versus Curtis, Ponzinibbio versus Harris, and Dern versus Ribas, were all my three favorite fights on the card. They were really entertaining. They both had good exchanges. The main event, I feel like, could have been a little bit better on the stand-up, but it did give us a finish in that third round, and it was an upset, as I thought Ribas was going to win again, but Dern did win, and it was a good win because she's already established in that division. So I do think overall this was a solid card, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad I chose to cover these three fights because they ended up being my three favorite fights on the card. Ponzinibbio in particular was a really good fight. I really liked that fight. I liked how he looked, and a solid performance overall.